It is the middle of August, and the soil has gone hard as concrete. Two tomato plants sit 3 feet apart in the same raised bed. Same variety, same seed packet, same day of planting back in May. The plant on the left has curled its leaves in on itself. Half its blossoms are already lying yellow in the dirt beneath it. The plant on the right is thick, dark green, and heavy with fruit. It is barely wilting, even in the worst heat of the afternoon. Same water, same sunlight, same bag of soil poured into the same hole. So why is one plant dying of thirst while the other barely notices? The answer has nothing to do with anything that happened this week. It happened back in May, in the 10 minutes it took to plant them. One seedling went into the ground exactly the way its plastic tag said to. Straight down, roots in the hole, stem standing tall above the soil. The other one went in the way an old-fashioned gardener would have done it, laid on its side, most of the stem buried under the dirt, only a few leaves left showing above the surface of the soil. That single difference is the whole reason one plant is struggling and the other is not. Because a buried tomato stem can do something almost no other vegetable can. It grows real roots along its entire length, underground, in the dark. A tomato planted the ordinary way keeps one small root ball near the surface. A tomato planted the old way builds a root system running feet in every direction. More roots pull more water up from deep soil during a dry stretch. More roots also mean steadier calcium reaching the fruit before it cracks or rots. Garden centers will not tell you any of this on the little plastic tag. That tag has to work for every plant sitting on the shelf, not just tomatoes. So it says the same line it says for peppers and basil and marigolds. Plant at the same depth as the pot, nothing more, nothing less. For almost everything else in your garden, that advice happens to be correct. For tomatoes, it is the reason so many plants never reach their real size. Stay with me and I will show you exactly how the old trick works, where to bury the stem, how deep to go, and the one mistake to avoid. And if old growing tricks like this one are useful to you, hit subscribe right now. It costs you nothing, and it means the next one finds you automatically. Here is something almost nobody explains about a tomato plant. Every one of those tiny fuzzy bumps on the stem is a root waiting to happen. Gardeners have called them root hairs for as long as anyone can remember. Botanists have a longer name for them, but the fuzz is the part that matters. Leave that fuzzy stem out in dry air, and it stays exactly what it is. Just a stem, holding leaves up toward the sun, nothing else. Bury that same fuzzy stem in moist soil, and everything changes within days. It starts pushing out real white roots, right along the buried section. Every extra inch of stem you bury becomes another inch of root system. Pull both plants at the end of the season, and the difference is obvious. The shallow planted tomato comes up with a root ball you could hold in 2 hands. The deep planted tomato comes up with roots spreading out in every direction. Some of those roots trace all the way back to where the buried stem was. It looks less like one plant and more like a small root network. That is the entire secret, and it only works on a handful of plants. Tomatoes have this ability strongly. Peppers and eggplants mostly do not. So do not try burying the stem on your pepper plants this year. It will not help them the way it helps a tomato. Squash and cucumber vines do something similar out in the open garden. Anywhere their stem touches damp soil along the row, it can root there too. A tomato just does the same trick straight down instead of sideways. Gardeners in short-season climates leaned on this trick the hardest of all. A longer root system meant a plant that survived a sudden dry spell. It also meant a plant that got a head start before the ground fully warmed. That buried stem sits below the coldest inch of spring soil, not sitting in it. This is also why a tall, floppy seedling from the nursery is not a problem. It is actually the easiest seedling to turn into your strongest plant of the summer. A short, stocky seedling gives you a short, stocky root system either way. A tall, leggy seedling gives you several extra inches of stem to bury. Those extra inches become extra roots, and extra roots become a stronger plant. The scraggly seedling you almost skipped at the nursery is often the better buy. Farm families who grew their own food figured this out generations ago. During the World War years, backyard victory gardens fed a huge share of the country. Every wasted seedling mattered when food was rationed, and seed packets were hard to replace. A trick that turned a struggling transplant into a strong producer was worth repeating carefully. That is likely where a good deal of this knowledge got sharpened and passed along. Nobody had a soil test kit, so they leaned on whatever worked for free. A bigger root system for the price of a slightly deeper hole cost nothing. That knowledge passed from mother to daughter in the garden, not in any book. It never made it onto the plastic tag stuck in a seedling six-pack. That tag has to be short enough to read in a few seconds, and simple enough to apply to every single plant in the greenhouse. Tomatoes got lumped in with everything else on the shelf, and the one trick that made them different never made the tag. That is genuinely all that happened. Nothing hidden, nothing planned. Just a shortcut that has cost home gardeners a stronger harvest for decades. Now let me walk you through exactly how to do this yourself. Wait until after your last frost date, once the soil has actually warmed up. A tomato planted deep into cold, wet soil in early spring struggles either way. Start with your seedling, tall or short. It genuinely does not matter. Look at the stem and count the sets of leaves growing up it. You are going to strip off every leaf except the top 2 or 3 sets. Pinch each leaf off gently, right where it meets the main stem. Do not be shy about this part, even if it feels wasteful. Every leaf you remove down there is about to become buried root instead. A leaf left on the buried section will simply rot underground, and a rotting leaf underground can spread disease straight up the stem. So strip it clean, every single leaf that is going below the soil line. Now choose between 2 methods, depending on how deep your soil actually is. If your bed is loose and deep, dig a straight hole for the stem. Make that hole about 2/3 as deep as the plant is tall. Set the stripped seedling down so only the top leaves show above ground. If your soil is shallow, rocky, or heavy clay, use a trench instead. Dig a shallow trench a few inches deep, running along the bed. Lay the stripped seedling on its side, roots and all, inside that trench. Gently bend the top few inches of stem upward toward the sky. Take your time with this bend. The stem is more flexible than it looks. Cover the entire buried length of stem with soil, firming it as you go. Leave only the top leaf sets showing above the surface, nothing else. Water it in deeply right away, enough to settle soil around the whole stem. If you use the trench method, space your plants a bit further apart than usual. That buried stem needs room to run sideways underneath the soil. Once the plant stands upright again, go ahead and stake or cage it as normal. The root system underneath will only make that support work better over time. A couple inches of mulch on top helps that soil hold its moisture afterward. Within a few days, that bent stem straightens itself back toward the sun. Within a week or two, tiny white roots start forming along the buried length. You will not see any of this happening, but you will see the results. A plant that stands stronger and drinks steadier than the one planted the old way. Keep the soil evenly moist for that first week while the new roots take hold. After that, you can ease back into your normal watering routine. Before we go any further, a quick favor if you have made it this far. If you have grown tomatoes before, tell me your growing zone in the comments. Tell me the variety you grow while you are down there too. I read through every single comment, and it shapes what I cover next. And if any of this is new to you, that is exactly why this channel exists, so go ahead and hit subscribe while you have it in mind. All right, back to the garden bed. While you have got that hole open, borrow one more habit from the old days. Crush up a handful of dried eggshells and drop them into the hole first. Eggshells are mostly calcium carbonate, the same mineral your own bones are made of. As they break down through the season, they feed calcium straight to those new roots. That steady calcium supply is exactly what helps prevent blossom end rot later on. You do not need fresh shells, just save them up over a few weeks. Rinse them, let them dry, and crush them by hand or with a rolling pin. A small handful under one plant is plenty. You do not need much at all. It is not the whole answer to blossom end rot. Watering still matters most. But it is one more old habit that costs nothing and never hurts a thing. 2 honest warnings before you try this on everything in your garden. First, if your tomato is a grafted variety, be careful with the graft point. You will see it as a small clip or a slight bump near the base. Grafted tomatoes are joined onto a separate, disease-resistant root system on purpose. Bury that graft point, and the plant's own roots take over underneath it. That defeats the entire reason you paid extra for a grafted plant. On a grafted tomato, only bury the stem up to that clip and stop. Second, this trick is only for tomato transplants, not for other vegetables. Do not try it on peppers, eggplants, or anything started directly from seed. Try it on a pepper, and you will end up with a rotted stem. Keep this trick set aside for tomato season, and tomato season only. One more note, if you are growing in a container instead of a garden bed. Choose a deep pot to start, so you actually have the room to bury the stem. A shallow pot will not give this trick enough depth to matter much. So what actually changes when you plant a tomato this way? The deep planted tomato is pulling water from soil a foot below the surface. That soil barely dries out, even through a stretch of 90-degree afternoons. The shallow-rooted plant beside it is drinking from the same few inches all day. Those are the same inches baking under direct sun for hours at a time. That gap is the entire difference between a wilting plant and a thriving one. More roots also mean steadier calcium reaching the fruit as it grows. Steady calcium is what keeps blossom end rot off the bottom of your tomatoes. That leathery black spot is usually a root and watering problem, not a soil problem. A deep root system smooths out the swings in moisture that cause it. You also end up with a sturdier plant overall by the middle of summer, one that shrugs off wind instead of leaning over after the first storm. By July, you can usually stretch out the days between waterings a little longer. The deeper roots are doing work the surface never could on their own. Give it 4 to 6 weeks after transplanting and check for yourself. Push a finger into the soil a few inches from the stem on both plants. The deep-planted tomato holds moisture noticeably longer than a shallow-planted neighbor would. That is not a coincidence. That is the extra root system doing its job. You will also usually notice fewer dropped blossoms during the first real heat wave. That is the deep roots keeping the plant steady while the shallow ones panic. I will not promise you double the harvest or some exact number. Every garden and every soil is a little different from the next. What I will tell you plainly is that more roots win almost every time, and the extra effort to get there is about 5 minutes at planting. This is not a secret that got hidden from you on purpose. It is a piece of knowledge that stopped getting passed down over time. Fewer families garden out of necessity than they did 100 years ago. Most of us buy a seedling already growing in a plastic pot from a store. That tag tells us to plant it at the same depth it already sits. A seed company does not profit from teaching you to grow a stronger plant. It profits more if a weak seedling dies and you buy another one next spring. 100 years ago, most families grew tomatoes because the alternative was going without. Today, most of us grow them because we enjoy it, which is a fine change. It also means fewer of us learn to garden by watching a parent do it. Nobody sat in a room and decided to keep this trick quiet. It simply stopped getting said out loud, one generation at a time. And once something stops getting said, it eventually stops getting known. That is the plain, unglamorous reason this free trick never made it onto a tag. Go back to the picture from the start of this video. 2 identical seedlings, planted the exact same day, watered the exact same way. The only difference was 10 minutes with a trowel and a willingness to strip off healthy leaves. One of them spent all August fighting for water in the driest inch of soil. The other one made peace with the drought back in May, a foot below the surface, where nobody watching could ever see it. Next time you bring home a tray of tomato seedlings, remember this trick. Strip the lower leaves. Dig the hole a little deeper than feels right. Or lay the stem sideways in a trench if your ground will not cooperate. Your grandmother knew this without ever reading a single gardening book. Now you know it too. There is nothing complicated about any of it, and that is sort of the point. The old tricks that actually work tend to be the simple ones. They just need someone to pass them along before they get lost for good. If this saves you a trip to replace a wilted seedling next summer, hit subscribe. Share it with the one person you know who always overwaters their tomatoes. And tell me in the comments, what old trick did your own grandmother swear by? I want to hear the ones that never made it into any gardening book. Next time, I will show you the old trick for stopping blossom end rot before it starts. Until then, get out there and dig that hole a little deeper than you think. Let the roots do the rest of the work for you.